Hello, my name is Catey Ott Thompson, and I'm the artistic director of Catey Ott Dance Collective. I started this dance collective company in 2005, and the company has lived in New York City as well as currently living in Milwaukee. I wanted to tell you about my first film ever, and that is with the videography of Christal Wagner. It's called Pandemic Survival and Revival. It originally was called In Good Company, and you'll understand why perhaps I both started with that theme or title and then moved away from it for the final release. So the Pandemic Survival Revival Quartet is with the four dancers in the company. We filmed it in early 2001. It is basically my reaction slash then the company's reaction to the attack of COVID on the individual within society. So the costumes you'll see are black attire, and the red masks not only were often mandatory for rehearsals and eventually filming and performance, but also represent the red of the COVID that we often see in that symbol. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about the creation of the dance itself. I started off in the studio by myself in December 2020, and with all that was going on, both in society, in the world, inside of me, all I could do for a while during that very first rehearsal was lie down on the floor. And it took me most of that rehearsal to start to move into a medium level space. So I realized there was a lot of information there already. So I started making phrase material literally on the floor, and gradually created all the material in the dance to eventually be standing, to be tall, to be vertical. So basically the five phrases within this piece are these five kind of stages of eventually becoming grounded, standing in your legs, in your body. And each one has a sense of like heightened technical requirement and physicality. All of them, even at their fullest height, have a sense of moodiness. And basically the overall within the five phrases, the main themes explored were isolation, depression, angst, lethargy, longing for a shift, surrender, and a need for group socialization, connection with others, and ultimately a return to a Zen place in order to endure or to recover or to revive. What I did for each of the dancers in the quartet is I made them a menu. It was a specific order of these five phrases. So there is very little, if at all, a time of unison in this quartet. So the menu of the five phrases was built based on my impressions or my actual like knowledge of what each particular dancer was going through during their journey through the pandemic. So one dancer would start standing and eventually create down movement to the floor. Another would start on the floor and eventually come to stand. And the other two were definitely some curvy roller coaster path in the middle of that. So the ending, basically, as I was describing before, just really comes back to the idea that breath, connectivity, even with spatial distance, a connection to each other in space became really, really important. Another interesting fact is that when we were in the rehearsal process, we had to be socially, spatially distanced, probably not socially, spatially distanced. So I divided the room, the rehearsal space up into quadrants. And so each of the dancers had a quadrant, and then eventually through the course of the dance, the quadrants all shift, and there's some spatial manipulation of pathways but that was definitely a necessity at that time in order to be able to rehearse together, and ultimately made some of the taping set an ideal situation for the floor for the final product with Christal. So just to really happily include / introduce the dancers, is I myself was dancing Catey Ott Thompson along with Sarah Chomeau, Natasha Posey, and Rebecca Johnson. They both have been in the company for quite a few years, and I will always be grateful for all of their input, all of their artistry, and all of the energy that they bring to each rehearsal and to the stage.
Thank you for giving us that explanation on your film. Now, with that, where was this shot?
This was shot at DanceWorks in the studio theater.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Did they use a multiple camera setup, and was it shot at once, or did you have to redo the dance many times for the camera angles?
This is an amazing question. The answer is many times, one camera. So we ran the dance, which is about 8.5 minutes, I believe, in its final edition. We probably ran it 12 times that day. So
it was shot in one
maybe
day.
a little bit less. Yeah, it was all shot in one day, in one rehearsal.
Okay. Wow, you guys must have been tired afterwards.
It was exhilarating.
Okay. It was shot 12 times in one day. When I watch it, it's pretty seamless. I mean, it looks like a multi-camera setup.
Our Christal Wagner is a really unique and amazing artist. She is a dancer and has turned, through the midst of her career, not only an amazing dancer, choreographer, but photographer, and now filmmaker. With the pandemic really brought a lot of that opportunity out for her. So being that she has such a intense dance background, it was a perfect synergy of energy, because she understood exactly where we were headed with the music. She understood, the energetic flow and how the angles would best complement, but also really reveal the emotionality of the dance itself.
And she
So
edited this too herself,
yes,
right? Okay.
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. How
I
big was
believe,
your crew?
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. How big was your crew?
Just Christal.
Just Christal.
Just Christal.
Wow. Did she light it herself too?
We had the dance studio lighting. I I'm trying to remember if she brought in any extra lights. I believe we were kind of on our own with the studio space lighting. So
Okay.
she had a light on her camera, clearly. But it was, we were bare bones. We were it.
Wow.
So
Okay.
yeah.
When was it shot?
It was the end of January, perhaps early February of 2021.
Okay.
So we created it throughout the course of that winter. It could have been even just a tad bit in, I believe it was still February, and then we received the final edits in March.
Now,
So
the dance itself, has that only been performed for this film project, or have you performed it in other presentations?
another great question. We performed the dance at the Milwaukee Fringe Festival at the Marcus Center in the Peck Pavilion last summer. So that was the big reveal, I guess, of that dance. It's live premiere, but the video was a really important version and ultimate result of this process.
So you haven't performed it since then?
We haven't.
Oh,
No.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, you got this on film for it to be seen out all out there.
Yeah, can I share one more thing about the film? It was part of Green Space, Fertile Ground platform in New York City as well. Valerie Green she curates a show and has applications for it. And so I applied, and because I've my New York connections, relationship, information, etc., was a great way to reconnect with Valerie Green. And also because of the pandemic, we were able to participate over video, when typically a performance at Fertile Ground at Green Space would be live in New York.
I have another question. I'm going to back up a little bit because you mentioned when you first talked about your film that this film had a different title at one point. What was the evolution of that title to what you have now? What was the determination to call it Pandemic Survival and Revival now instead of what you had?
Great question. In Good Company was the original title, and it actually is the ending. And that was, we were able to rehearse.
Okay.
That's the shiny, bright star. Before that, I was dancing alone in my kitchen. We were Zooming or having phone calls, emails, etc. But we were not connected in the way that we had been for years and years as a group, as a collective, as a company. So it almost was working itself simultaneously between like the places that we felt alone, the places that we felt starting to get back into our body, minds in rehearsal, and then ultimately rehearsing, finding that connection to each other, and feeling that physical endurance to run the piece as many times as we did for the video. I'm wondering if 12 was a slight exaggeration, but we had the space for 2 hours, so we ran it a lot.
Is this first film project, or have you done any before this?
It is the first bigger film project. I did a film in June 2020. It was called Little Sparrow, and I did that outside with Christal. It was in a garden space, and my mother-in-law had died, and so I made like a memorandum piece for her, and Christal worked with me on that, and I had such a great time working with her. There was no question that I would wanted to deepen not only that artistic relationship with Christal, but also that sense of trust. It also was very intriguing to work on a video. I really enjoyed it. So this project felt like the heart of this new investigation, where Little Sparrow was a 3-minute, almost like tasting for it.
So was this conceived as a film project, or was it conceived as a dance performance first?
That is a great question. And I'm headed towards, it just needed to get into rehearsal.
Okay.
It just needed to land in a floor, and we just needed to reunite. It was one of the first pieces that I started in a while that didn't have originally a deadline. We were just together making work, rehearsing.
Need to create something.
Yeah, just needed to create. Quite obviously, it needed not to be a live performance. So as I was working on the phrases, I was just being me in space, moving with my feelings, with musicality in mind, and a layering of moods and shifts, etc. With this menu that I created for each of the dancers. But Christal really brought that eye of angle. I feel like when I create dances, audience shouldn't be assumed as the front. I often feel like my dances are created inside of like a snow globe for any angle to be seen. And that's a constant challenge. It's easy to get very frontal in work. So I think Christal really helped share what was there, and she helped bring it to light. There was one other thing I wanted to tell you. Oh, the composer. Mm-hmm. The composer, this was original music, and the composer lives in Baltimore. Oh. So I've never met the composer other than Zoom. We have a mutual friend, and this was our first project together. So we would go back and forth with video and his musical interpretation of what we were doing back and forth. So if I could explain that a little bit further, um, Tim Nohe is the composer, and he sent over a file of some things that he had been just generating. And I listened to a couple of them, and the seed of the score, I believe, was about a 3-minute piece. And I listened to it, I was moving to it. I created the movement both in silence and to almost like, I'll explain my process in a minute. I'm going to pause myself. But so we played with the material to Tim's 3-minute score. After a few tries, we're like, yeah, there's really something here. So I then went back and forth with Tim with videos of rehearsal, and he would expand the score, send it back. We would use his expanded score, experiment with that, interpret that, play with that. And then I would send that video back to Tim, and Tim would put on some nuances and ask me questions about how, ending feels, or are there enough tones, or how would you like this tone to be into the final tone? And it was really, really interesting. Tim is a really, really smart human. So I really enjoyed working with him, and we've worked together since. Um, so I feel like what he brought to the equation was really ultimately a sense of timing that unified us as dancers to ourselves, to each other, to breath, to the floor, to society, to this film. The reason I paused before is that I often create phrases in silence. So I'm working on that inner rhythm as opposed to choosing music before I start creating. This particular time was difficult. Like I said, first rehearsal, just not wanting to get off the floor. Then I put on literally different pieces of recorded music from Spotify, just some pop music, some fun music, trying to kind of shake it up a little bit inside of me on a cellular level. So I had my silence, I had my like pop music to inspire energy. And then the phrases were taken from silence, were playfully, temporarily overlapped with some pop, which we used almost just as a rehearsal. I wouldn't even say tool, but a rehearsal layer. And then clearly that was stripped away. The dance was re-looked at in silence. And the dance then was enhanced by Tim's music. And then that back and forth conversation we had.
Are you thinking of doing any more projects like this? Film projects?
That is a great question also. We're currently working on 2 pieces. Both the pieces are actually finished. One of them is a solo that I just made called Invisible Mind Escape. And that was created for a performance in Madison with Lee Chopping Dance. I just premiered that in late June. So that is living in one bubble of my brain. Then I also just made a new quartet that actually also has 2 casts. So we're rotating in and out a bit for our performances from now through September. So at the moment, Christal actually did video record the Madison performance, but it was a concert performance. I feel like in that Invisible Mind Escape would actually make a really interesting film, and it might open up ideas to really play with lighting and atmosphere in a way that the pure concert format couldn't provide. But I also really love live performance. I'm excited that I'm now able to think and dabble and explore and grow as an artist through both forms.
Yeah, it's interesting. This year we've we've gotten a lot of films from dancers making like their first films and all that. I think maybe it's because of the pandemic, they're looking to reach out and try different medias to get their work out there. Thank you very much for doing this today.
Oh, thank you so much. I really, really look forward to this, and I'm ecstatic that something like this could come out of the pandemic, survival and revival, literally, for all of us, that we're making art and finding ways to keep creating and sharing. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.